There are transport operations that seem impossible. Moving a NASA spacecraft through the streets of Los Angeles, carrying a 300-meter oil rig across the open ocean, loading a 400-ton transformer onto a custom-built vessel and sailing it halfway around the world. These operations push the boundaries of what human engineering can achieve. Eve and they are remarkable for exactly that reason. But today we are going to talk about something different, something that was not just difficult, something that had never been done before in human history at this scale, something that the engineers who were asked to do it initially thought was a joke. We are going to talk about how a team of experts in California picked up a 4-story hotel with 86 rooms and moved it 180 feet down the road, and then put it back down perfectly. Welcome to World Unveiled. This is the story of how they moved the Montgomery Hotel. The Hotel Montgomery was built in San Jose, California in 1911 by a businessman named Thomas S. Montgomery. The timing of its construction was deliberate. San Jose had just opened its first railway station, and the city was growing rapidly. Montgomery saw the opportunity and took it. He purchased a plot of land near the new station and built what was, for its time, one of the most sophisticated hotels in California. The building was 4 stories tall and contained 86 rooms. It was constructed using reinforced concrete and steel at a time when most buildings of comparable ambition were still being built with wood. The facilities inside were extraordinary for the era. Every room had a private bathroom. Every room had its own telephone line. Blower fans provided ventilation throughout the building. Elevators connected all 4 floors. A free bus service collected guests from the railway station and delivered them to the door. In the first decade of the 20th century, the Hotel Montgomery was effectively the 5-star hotel of San Jose, the most prestigious address in the city, and the building that most people associated with the city's identity. The hotel thrived for decades. The period from 1920 to 1960 is considered its golden era, a 40-year stretch during which it was the center of business and social life in San Jose. Then, the city kept growing, and the competition increased. New hotels were built throughout the 60s and 70s, modern buildings with contemporary designs that made the Montgomery look increasingly dated. By the 1980s, the hotel had closed. By the 199th zeros, it stood empty on one of the most valuable plots of land in downtown San Jose, a shuttered historic building surrounded by thriving modern competitors. The Fairmont Hotel, directly adjacent to the Montgomery, had 535 rooms and was consistently overbooked. The Fairmont's management calculated that they needed 400 additional rooms to meet demand. The plot, occupied by the closed Montgomery, was the only available land near them. In 1999, they purchased the Hotel Montgomery with the intention of demolishing it and building a new tower on the site. The announcement of the demolition plan brought the people of San Jose onto the streets. The protests were significant and genuine. The Montgomery was not just a building to the people who had grown up in the city. It was a landmark. It was the physical representation of San Jose's history, a structure that had been part of the city's identity for nearly 90 years. During the mayoral election campaign of 1999, a candidate named R. Gonzalez made a specific promise to the community. If he was elected, he would not allow the Hotel Montgomery to be demolished. He won the election, and now he had to figure out how to keep his promise, while also allowing the Fairmont to expand on land they had already purchased and paid for. The Your consulted architects, engineers, urban planners, and preservation specialists. Nobody had a solution that satisfied both requirements. Then, a team of architects offered an idea so unusual that the mayor's initial reaction, according to people present in the meeting, was to assume they were making a joke, move the building, not demolish it, not preserve it in place, pick it up and carry it to a new location 180 feet away, where there was an empty plot of land owned by the San Jose Redevelopment Agency. The Fairmont would then have their expansion site. The Montgomery would survive, and San Jose would keep its landmark. The mayor allocated a budget of $12.5 million and assembled a team of specialists to determine whether the idea was actually achievable or whether the architects who had proposed it had dramatically underestimated what moving a 90-year-old reinforced concrete hotel would involve. The first challenge was understanding what they were dealing with. Engineers conducted a full structural assessment of the building, checking the condition of every beam and every column, taking precise measurements of the entire structure, and mapping the underground gas pipelines that would need to be rerouted before any movement could begin. He building weighed approximately 4,500 tons. To give that number a physical reference point, it is the equivalent of 25 fully loaded Boeing 747 aircraft, or approximately 750 African elephants. Ants standing in a pile. The weight alone was not the primary obstacle. The primary obstacle was that no building of this size had ever been moved in this way before. The engineering team was genuinely working without a precedent to follow. Before any structural work could begin, the historic interior of the building had to be protected. The ornate false ceiling was carefully dismantled and stored in sections. The original mosaic floor tiles, which had the name Montgomery written into them in decorative patterns, were cut into individual squares, catalogued and preserved. All of the original woodwork from the early 20th century was removed and stored. The process of preserving the hotel's historic contents took months and required the kind of meticulous attention to detail that is normally associated with archaeological excavation rather than construction work. Then came the technically demanding phase. The new location 180 feet away was prepared with a specially designed foundation. The critical requirement was absolute precision. The new foundation had to align exactly with the column positions of the existing building. The tolerance was measured in millimeters. A single millimeter of misalignment between any column and its corresponding foundation point would create stress concentrations in the structure that CIA would cause catastrophic cracking or collapse when the building WAS lowered into its final position. The survey teams worked with total station instruments and repeated their measurements multiple times to verify accuracy before any concrete was poured for the new foundation. In the year 2000, the actual movement began. 8 specially designed computerized hydraulic jacks were positioned beneath the ground floor of the building. Each jack had wheels that could be steered with computer-controlled precision. The jacks were activated gradually, transferring the load of the building from its original foundation columns to the jack system. When 80% of the building's weight S confirmed to be resting on the jacks, the engineers began cutting through the original foundation columns one by one. When the last column was cut, FR 1,500 tons of reinforced concrete hotel was resting entirely on 8 computerized D jacks. There was no longer any connection between the building, G, and the ground beneath it. For the first time in its 90-year existence, the Hotel Montgomery had no foundation. Half the population of San Jose came to watch. The rest watched on television. The jacks began to move. At a pace measured in inches per minute, the building rolled across the distance between its original position and its new foundation, navigating the route that engineers had plot D and leveled in advance. The movement took 15 minutes. When the building reached its new location, the jacks were aligned with the precision that the survey teams had spent months establishing, and the building was lowered millimeter by millimeter onto its new foundation. When the connection was confirmed, the crowd that had gathered to watch erupted. The building that had been part of San Jose's identity for nearly a century had just traveled 180 feet down the road and arrived safely at its destination. The renovation work took 2 years. The historic tiles were reinstalled. The original woodwork was returned to its positions. The false ceiling was re-asked. MBL-ed. In 2002, the Hotel Montgomery reopened under the name 4 Points by Sheraton, managed by Marriott International, and it has been operati non continuously ever since. The total cost of the move and renovation was $26 million. The Fairmont built its expansion on the vacated site. The mayor kept his promise. The engineer solved a problem that had been solved before. And a 4-story concrete hotel built in 1911 is still welcoming guests in San Jose today, 180 feet from where it started, on a foundation it did not have when it was built. This is World Unveiled. Subscribe, because the most extraordinary engineering stories are always the ones where someone said it was impossible and then did it anyway.